let me go across to Sushant Sareen, who's joining us on this broadcast. Sushant, if I talk about the kind of reactions that have been coming in from Global Times, that is seen as the official mouthpiece of China, an attempt being made really to deflect the entire issue, because questions certainly will be raised of China as well, given how China has always seen Shinzo Abe as an enemy, given the kind of assertiveness that Shinzo Abe has always adopted against China. But these kind of reactions coming in with, pinning the blame on right-wing forces, that it is the right-wing forces that are perhaps behind this attack, extremely uncalled for and doesn't quite add up. Mr. Sareen, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're right. It's extremely unfortunate and it's extremely stupid because, the Global Times, which is edited by a loudmouth himself, for them to jump to conclusions as to what the motives are, what the antecedents of the assailant is, it's kind of crazy. We don't know, was the man a crazy, was the man politically motivated, was he a hired killer, what was his motivation? Nobody knows as of now until investigations are complete. Yes. For the Chinese, however, it's not surprising that they didn't like Mr. Abe. Anybody who stands up for the interests of their country, anybody who stands up to Chinese bullying, anybody who calls out the Chinese for their predatory practices is somebody the Chinese are not going to like. Now, Mr. Abe was an unapologetic Japanese nationalist. Again, he was not, one of the loonies whose nationalism was absolutely of the crazy level. But he was a proud Japanese leader who believed that Japan needs to not get guilt-tripped by what happened 75 years back. Who believed that Japan had a role to play in international diplomacy, who believed that Japan had a responsibility to stand up to China and its bullying. So obviously the Chinese were not going to like him. Do you think the Chinese like Mr. Modi? The Chinese will love a leader who is ready to genuflect before Emperor Xi, whatever that emperor is. But the Chinese otherwise will not like anybody who stands up to them. So I'm not surprised by the Chinese reaction and the kind of visceral reaction which we are seeing from China, and which also tells you a lot about what the Chinese so-called civilization is all about. This is not the behavior of a civilized people. This is not the behavior of a civilized nation to celebrate over the death of or at least the assault on a very popular leader of a neighboring country. But well, that is what Chinese civilization is, and I think it's exposing itself before the world. So
yes. Well, the fact is, Mr. Sareen, that Shinzo Abe is a conservative and, popularly, widely, he's been described as a right-wing Japanese nationalist. The fact is also that his tenure as the Prime Minister of Japan was known internationally for his government's economic policies, which further pursued fiscal stimulus. We've seen that happen. We've seen experts point that out in Japan through and through, how it's led to monetary easing and structural reforms in the country.
Yes, so Japan has been stuck in a kind of the economy hasn't really taken off after it's been stalling for a fair bit of time. And what Mr. Abe did was, and which is why Abenomics became such a big deal. Mr. Abe came in and he tried to put in more stimulus into the economy. He had a far more expansionary program. Yes, it's created certain imbalances in the Japanese economy. For example, Japan has one of the highest debt to GDP ratios, but then Japan is an extremely competitive economy. It's the third largest economy in the world anyways. So yes, I think Mr. Abe did try to break out of the rut in which the Japanese economy was caught in the 1990s. It's been a 20-year-long period which he tried to break out of. So yes, he had plenty of accomplishments. Again, as a political leader, the longest-serving prime minister in Japan, which is not a mean thing. But even more importantly, if you look at his strategic vision, if you look at the fact that he could, he could anticipate what was going to happen in the world going forward, I think the world will be a poorer place if Mr. Abe does not survive this attack on him. It will be a much poorer place. We need leaders like him in the world.
Yes, and he's the one who in fact launched his Abenomics policy to lift the economy out of deflation in the country. Now, Mr. Sareen, if we talk about, the information that is coming in as far as this attack goes, Yamagami, who is the suspect who's now been arrested as well, apparently has told the investigators that he was dissatisfied with Abe and targeted him with an intention to kill. Now, what do you suspect this to be? A crazy person who just, went out, stepped out while he was delivering a speech, shot at him? Or do you think there can be an ulterior motive? Don't know whether it will be whether it is an internal hand or an external hand, because there are a lot of possibilities given the kind of reputation he enjoyed across the world.
Look, that's right. Japan has its share of crazies. Japan has a serious mental health problem also. That is something which, is not often spoken about, but it is something which is quite clear of the kind of problems which are there as far as the Japanese society is concerned. So it is possible that here is a guy who, has made Mr. Abe an object of hate for himself, and not for any political reasons, but for a variety of other reasons. He could have said that he wants to target Mr. Abe. It could be that he is a crazy who has a political motive. It could be that he's acting crazy, but has been put up to this job or has been motivated for political reasons. Japan also has a number of crazy cults. You had those crazies who went and carried out this poison gas attack in the Japanese subway years back. So you've had these kind of instances also in Japan. So we don't know where exactly this guy is coming from, what exactly his motivations are. I'm sure the investigators will find out. What we are getting is just dribbles of information. It's very difficult to, narrow down on his motivations merely on the basis of those dribbles of information. So I think we are in the speculation stage right now. And hopefully, once the investigations are over, we'll have a better idea. I wouldn't be very surprised if this guy was pure crazy, but it is also possible that it could be part of a larger conspiracy. How can you rule that out until the investigations are complete? So let's wait and see what exactly is behind it.
Yes. And, gun control discussions crop up every time this kind of a shooting incident takes place. Now, given that he's the former prime minister of the country, of course, this becomes extremely critical. But Japan has gotten away with much of that problem. We'll focus on that, come back to you, Mr. Sareen, shortly, but quickly playing out that video clip once again, wherein the moment of attack is extremely clear. Mr. Sareen, we began this discussion by talking about China and, China's past relationship with Shinzo Abe. Now, many believe that he's really spearheaded the anti-China sentiment and has set an example, therefore, for several global powers to follow suit on confronting Chinese hegemonic ambitions in Indo-Pacific. Do you agree, sir?
Partly. I won't say that he set off the anti-China sentiment. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's correct, or that's not the right way to phrase it.
Right.
What he did was that he understood the real nature of China, the kind of expansionary nature of China, the bullying which China does, the kind of predatory practices which China follows. He is a man who was far more clear-headed than any other political leader around the world who saw this much before anybody else did. As a result, when he started talking about, in a manner of speaking, I think you can call him the father of the Quad. He was somebody who spoke about democracies coming together to take on China, to kind of, in a sense, stop China in its tracks. He is the man who visualized the whole concept of a Quad. He is the man who was not going to be apologetic before China anymore. He is somebody who struck a very good friendship with Mr. Modi, for example. And both of them used their personal rapport to take India-Japan relations to a new high. Now, this is also why you will see that after Mr. Modi comes into power and Mr. Abe was Prime Minister in Japan, you will see the amount of interest that was put into, or the amount of capital that was put into building up the Quad. You had the Australians then come in. The Americans were obviously going to be a pivotal power as far as the Quad was concerned. But the concept of Quad was in some ways the work of Mr. Abe. The foundation which he was associated with in Japan, and I remember way back, and I'm talking about almost 10, 12 years back, that particular foundation, along with the Vivekananda International Foundation in India,